Welcome to the stories on Echoes of Revenge. Step into a world where love turns dangerous, revenge feels inevitable, and every story drags you deeper into the shadows of desire, betrayal, and the human heart. Let's begin today's story. The polished conference room at Sterling & Associates overlooked Boston Harbor as the city's most exclusive real estate brokers gathered for their quarterly luxury market briefing. I sat quietly in the back row, watching my parents command attention at the head table while discussing their latest property acquisitions with the confidence of seasoned investors. The Pemberton family has always understood the importance of strategic real estate diversification. Dad was explaining to Marcus Sterling, whose brokerage handled only 8-figure transactions. When you have generational wealth, maintaining a balanced portfolio becomes essential for legacy preservation. Sterling nodded approvingly, clearly impressed by Dad's apparent investment acumen. Your recent acquisitions have been remarkable. The Nantucket estate, the Manhattan penthouse, the Aspen ski lodge, all premium properties in appreciating markets. I sipped my coffee silently, accustomed to invisibility at these gatherings where my family showcased their supposed real estate empire. At 29, I'd perfected the art of blending into expensive backgrounds while they discussed property values and market timing, all funded by what they believed was an inexhaustible family trust. Speaking of strategic acquisitions, interrupted Patricia Whitmore, whose opinion shaped Boston's luxury real estate market, I heard you're considering that waterfront estate in the Hamptons. Absolutely stunning property with incredible investment potential. Mom's eyes lit up with enthusiasm as she adjusted her Cartier watch. We've been watching that property for months. The location is perfect for our summer entertaining, and the market fundamentals suggest excellent appreciation potential. Absolutely, Dad added, straightening his custom cufflinks. Family wealth requires careful stewardship. When you find premium assets at reasonable valuations, you act decisively. The irony was breathtaking. The $15 million Hamptons estate he described as a reasonable valuation would be purchased with money from what he thought was our family trust. Funds that actually came from my technology patents and cryptocurrency investments. Just another small transfer for the beach house, Dad had said casually last week, requesting what he assumed was a routine withdrawal from unlimited family resources. The Pemberton Trust has always supported our lifestyle requirements. The small transfer he referenced so dismissively was actually $8 million from my personal investment accounts, carefully structured to maintain the fiction that our family possessed inherited wealth. Poor Charlotte works some little tech job, Mom explained to Sterling with maternal concern. Nothing that generates significant income, but we help her when possible. Not everyone inherits the family business sense. The comment was designed to emphasize my supposed financial dependence while highlighting their generous inclusion of their struggling daughter. What they didn't know was that my little tech job involved managing a $70 million portfolio. She can't afford these property investments, Dad added with paternal disappointment. We've tried to involve her in family financial planning, but she lacks the sophistication for high-level wealth management. What made their performance remarkable was how completely they'd convinced themselves that inherited wealth had transformed them from middle-class professionals into real estate moguls. They'd spent 4 years building a property empire while creating elaborate stories about trust fund management. Tomorrow's meeting with my forensic accounting team would clarify exactly who owned which assets in our family's real estate portfolio. The real estate briefing continued with familiar patterns. Established investors comparing acquisition strategies while analyzing market trends. My family moved through conversations like seasoned developers, accepting praise for their apparent investment wisdom and portfolio growth. The Pemberton family represents exactly what we value in clients, announced Sterling during the afternoon's market analysis. Their combination of inherited wealth and strategic thinking has created one of Boston's most impressive private real estate portfolios. Over the following weeks, their acquisition appetite accelerated to levels that would have impressed commercial developers. A vineyard in Sonoma, a ski chalet in Whistler, a historic brownstone in Georgetown. Every property justified as essential diversification for their expanding empire. We need to consider international markets, Mom announced during dinner at their newest acquisition, a penthouse overlooking Boston Common. The London market presents interesting opportunities for families with global investment capacity. Excellent thinking, Dad agreed, reviewing property listings featuring castles and estates across Europe. The Pemberton wealth should reflect international sophistication, not just domestic holdings. Their international sophistication would require approximately $50 million for the European properties they'd begun researching. Money they expected to access through the trust fund that existed only in their imagination. What about Charlotte? Mom asked with false concern. Should we help her purchase something modest? I know her tech work doesn't generate enough for property ownership. We'll consider it, Dad replied with paternal condescension. But she needs to demonstrate more appreciation for family support before we invest in her housing situation. The cognitive dissonance was becoming mathematically impossible to sustain. They needed plausible explanations for accessing unlimited trust fund distributions, but their spending had exceeded any reasonable inheritance within 2 years. The family legal team suggests restructuring ownership for optimal tax efficiency, Dad explained to his investment club, discussing estate planning for properties they'd never actually purchased. Generational wealth requires sophisticated structures to preserve family legacy. His sophisticated structures consisted entirely of signing documents I'd prepared and authorizing purchases from accounts I'd funded, but he'd convinced himself that his financial acumen was responsible for our real estate success. What made their delusions particularly dangerous was how they'd begun leveraging properties against future trust fund distributions they assumed would continue indefinitely. Mortgages, credit lines, and investment commitments all structured around money they thought belonged to them by birthright. Charlotte should be grateful for family generosity, Mom declared when I hesitated about another property loan. Most families don't share wealth so freely with unsuccessful relatives. Their generosity with my own money was particularly galling, especially when combined with lectures about gratitude for support I was actually providing to them. Tomorrow's surprise audit would provide an educational opportunity about the difference between inherited wealth and earned investment capital. The private conference room at my law firm commanded respect with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston's financial district. Jennifer Morrison, my forensic accountant for 5 years, had analyzed portfolios for the world's wealthiest families. Thank you for attending this asset verification meeting, Morrison began, arranging documents across the polished table. Our investigation into the Pemberton family property holdings has revealed significant ownership irregularities requiring immediate clarification. I'd convinced my parents this was a routine trust fund optimization review, designed to improve their tax efficiency and estate planning. They'd arrived expecting to discuss portfolio expansion strategies. Our forensic analysis has identified substantial discrepancies in property ownership documentation, Morrison continued, activating her presentation system. The Pemberton family has been operating under assumptions about asset ownership that require correction. Charts appeared showing their property acquisitions, $43 million in real estate purchases over 4 years that supposedly came from inherited family wealth. According to our investigation, there are no Pemberton family trust funds, inherited estates, or generational wealth sources, Morrison explained with professional precision. Every property in your portfolio has been purchased using funds from Ms. Charlotte Pemberton's personal investment accounts. The numbers appeared like accusations, each property deed showing my name as the sole legal owner while my parents had assumed joint family ownership. The Nantucket estate, Manhattan penthouse, Aspen Lodge, and all subsequent acquisitions were funded through Ms. Pemberton's technology patents and cryptocurrency investments, Morrison continued, advancing to documentation that would destroy their 4-year fantasy. New documents flooded the screen. Patent royalties, trading profits, investment returns. 4 years of my financial success traced with legal precision. Ms. Pemberton structured these purchases as family loans to maintain harmony while building a substantial real estate portfolio. However, the loans now total over $40 million and no repayment arrangements exist. The silence was deafening as they confronted evidence that couldn't be dismissed. The daughter you've described as financially unsuccessful has been your sole source of property investment capital for 4 years. Without her technology success, you would own no real estate assets whatsoever. Morrison addressed my parents with authority from analyzing billions in client assets. You've been living in properties owned entirely by your daughter while believing you possessed inherited wealth that has never existed. Dad's face had gone ashen. That's impossible. Charlotte works some small tech job. Mr. Pemberton, your daughter's technology consulting firm has generated over $70 million through software patents and cryptocurrency trading. Her small tech job has created one of New England's most successful private investment portfolios. Behind Morrison stood my real estate attorney and property manager, holding deed transfers that would formalize what had always been legally true. Every property belonged entirely to me. Effective immediately, all property titles will reflect accurate ownership, Morrison announced. Ms. Pemberton is assuming direct control of her real estate portfolio. The aftermath was immediate and comprehensive. Within 72 hours, my parents discovered they owned no real estate assets and owed over $40 million in property loans they couldn't repay. Eviction notices arrived at properties they'd assumed were theirs by inheritance. I immediately assumed direct control of all properties, ending 4 years of allowing them to live in homes they'd never purchased. Without my continued financial support, they faced the reality of their actual economic situation. The Hamptons estate they'd planned to purchase was cancelled when financing applications revealed they possessed no assets or income sources. The European properties they'd been researching became impossible when banks discovered their wealth was entirely fictional. Their real estate investment club membership ended when other members learned that Pemberton properties belonged entirely to a daughter they'd dismissed as unsuccessful. The reputation they'd built on property ownership crumbled along with access to assets they'd never earned. Dad's confidence as an investment advisor evaporated when clients discovered his personal wealth was borrowed from a daughter whose success he'd consistently undermined. Mom's social standing disappeared along with access to properties that had defined their lifestyle. The penthouse they'd been living in was sold immediately, forcing them into modest rental housing that reflected their actual income level. The vineyard, ski lodge, and brownstone followed, all liquidated to restructure my portfolio without family complications. They attempted reconciliation with desperate appeals about misunderstood family arrangements and shared ownership assumptions. But I'd learned that respect emerging only after asset revelation isn't genuine. It's panic disguised as appreciation. The real estate portfolio continues generating substantial returns through professional management and strategic acquisitions. My actual property investments support affordable housing development, philanthropy funded by earned success rather than fictional inheritance. 6 months later, they still send occasional messages requesting assistance to avoid homelessness. But the fundamental dynamic has changed. They can no longer dismiss my achievements while living in properties I own. The property deeds sit framed in my home office, reminders that ownership matters more than family assumptions. True real estate success comes from earned capital and strategic thinking, not inherited fantasy. Sometimes the most important property transfer is removing family members who only valued your assets while dismissing your capabilities.